As we read a few verses tonight, I'm going to be reading out of 2 Kings, the 7th chapter. 2 Kings, the 7th chapter. I'm just going to read a few verses here as we begin. And then I'll come back and cover a few more verses as we move through this message tonight. The Bible says, Then Elisha said, 2 Kings 7:1, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Then the Lord, on whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. Verse 3, And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate, and they said one to another, Why sit we here until we die? Amen. Somebody say, desperate times calls for desperate measures. Amen.
Amen.
Desperate times calls for and demands desperate measures. I want to talk to you about the attitude. Everybody say the attitude.
Yeah.
The attitude of the desperate. Amen. I want to talk to you about the attitude of the desperate. You may be seated. Amen. When I talk about desperation, I'm talking about a feeling, a sense, a place, an idea where you're being pushed or forced into a place of hopelessness.
That's right.
It's just, you've done everything that you know to do. And you've tried everything that you can. And you take on an attitude that this is serious. And this is not only serious, but there's a manner about my life that I can no longer keep living like I've been living. I cannot keep doing what I am doing. And so, as my father used to say, you just get reckless. Look at your neighbor and say reckless.
Reckless.
My father had reckless faith. Amen. Reckless faith. It did not matter what the situation was. It did not matter what the circumstance was. He would always match the situation with reckless faith. To say, I cannot just approach this with ordinary faith or average faith, but I have to step out of my comfort zone and just get reckless for a while. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what it seems like. It doesn't matter what it feels like. I'm not going to be overrun with this. I'm going to match this opposition with reckless faith. I'm talking to you about the attitude that you have to adopt when you get desperate. If you don't change and adopt a new type of attitude, then I've seen desperate people do things that cost them everything. There's some things in our lives that will never change. Somebody shout, never change.
Never.
There's some things that will never change until we get desperate. It's never going to be different until I get desperate. It's never going to be any different than it is right now until I get desperate about that situation. You know the difference between wanting something to change and making up your mind that you're going to do something about changing it. Amen. Some people want their life to change. They want their circumstances to change. They want their situations to change, but they're not desperate enough to do anything about it. It's when you go beyond wanting it to change and actively getting involved and seeing it change that something will happen. Amen. I read Do you know what I'm talking about? I'd rather get out there and try than not do anything at all.
Come on.
Some people talk about wanting things to change but never do anything about it
That's right. That's right.
to make a change. Never take any steps to make a change. And 10 years later, they're still talking about that situation on the job. They're still discussing that situation in their family. They're still talking about, man, wouldn't it be nice if that, if somehow it would ever, and they've done nothing to change it. Just want it to change. There's a big difference in wanting it to change and actively making it change. Amen. There are people that are content with their struggle. Do you know people that are content with their struggle? They just learn to live with it. There may be some things you have to learn to live with, but most of the time you don't have to learn to live with it. You can do something about it. You can do something about it. I could tell you stories of people that I've pastored through the years, and things in their lives that if God were to step in and come through for them, they would not know how to live. Because they've become so dependent upon their issue and problem that it now is their identity. And they would not know how to go forward. Let me give you an example. Years ago, a friend of mine that I grew up with, he joined on with the sheriff's department. And in the particular department that he is a part of, still to this day, almost 30 years later, he started out working in the jail, in the county jail. Most of the deputies, at least in that department, that's where they start. They start at the county jail before they ever get to patrol. And I remember close to 30 years ago us talking about it, and the jail being overpopulated and not the most comfortable of situations. I went with him several floors and stories of jail and people and life and humanity and issues and problems and the overcrowdedness there and the lack of supplies and basic necessities and things of that nature that you and I may look at and say, man, I would not want to spend one night there. I would not want to be in that environment for one night, much less any prolonged period of time. But he would tell me back in those days of how after a long shift he would walk out of the county jail trying to get to his personal vehicle to go home, and somebody approach him in the parking lot that maybe was discharged or released a day or two before, coming to him saying, boss, man, just lock me up. Can you lock me up? Why would I want to lock you up? We just let you out a day or two ago. No, you got to lock me up. Why do I have to lock you up? Have you done anything? Have you committed any crime? No, I haven't done anything, but I can't exist out here. I don't have anywhere to sleep, and I don't know where to get any food, and I don't know how I'm going to make it. Some people get so dependent upon things that are less, things that are not necessarily beneficial, but it becomes their reality that if things were to change and offer them any advantage, they wouldn't know how to live. They wouldn't know how to go on because they're so comfortable and so dependent upon things.
Right.
Please, I'm not trying to point anybody out here or make you feel uncomfortable, but I've pastored people that are so comfortable and used to receiving a government check, or they're so used to on some maybe technicality or medical diagnosis that they would say something that happened decades before. They're still living in that right now. And they have so much to offer and could have so much more in life. I've even had those conversations with people that if God were to heal you, you wouldn't even know how to live. I'm convinced that if God were to answer your prayer and perform a miracle in your desperation. Desperation makes you rise up and do stuff that you're just no longer content with your struggle. I hope I help somebody.
Come on, it's good.
I hope I help somebody. Don't be content with your struggle. Don't just settle in there and say, this is the way it's always been. This is the way it's always going to be. This is the way I've always faced it, and this is the way I'll always face it. It was in my family. It was in my parents. It's been passed down to me. This is the situation. Nothing's ever going to change. Let me preach to you. In one service, God can turn everything around. In one service, God can change everything in your world. In one service, God can literally revolutionize your life. And you can walk out of here saying, I never dreamed it could be like this. I never thought it could be like this. I didn't have any idea it could be like this. But let me tell you, there's nothing too hard for our God. There's nothing too difficult for our God. There is nothing beyond His power, beyond His ability, beyond His authority, and beyond His control. He can change it all in a moment of time.
Yes, yes.
God can do it. Somebody shout, God can do it.
God can do it.
Amen. When we finally get to the place that nothing else matters, then we can begin to see things turn around.
Yeah.
We can see things turn around. We can see things change. Anybody have situations in your life you want to see turn around?
Amen.
Come on, help me for a moment. You have situations, you have things that are on your mind, weighing on your heart, that you're ready for it to turn around. I want to preach to you in this service tonight. It can turn. Amen. In this service tonight, it can change. You can walk out of here and everything that you came in with, carrying the heaviness, the issues, the stress, the burden, you can leave it right here tonight, and God can turn it all around. He's that kind of God. He's a right now kind of God. Amen. And right now, He's already in this place. And there's no sickness, and there's no issue, and there's no situation that He cannot speak to tonight and completely turn it all around.
That's right.
God can do it. I believe that. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be serving Him. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't spend one more Sunday in His house. I'd just go do something else. But I just believe when I show up that there isn't anything too hard for Him. There isn't any situation that I've encountered. There isn't anything that I've gone through that He's not able to give me the strength. Give me the grace to endure. The grace to face, the grace to get through, the grace to deal with. Grace is not just the unmerited favor of God, but grace is the power of God to do the will of God.
Yes, amen.
Come on, His will is bigger than us. His will is more challenging than what we can imagine. That's what grace is. He gives us the grace to do what He's called us to. Amen. He gives us the grace to weather the storm. He gives us the grace to make it through the sleepless night. He gives us the grace to just keep fighting on when everything is against you. I don't have that strength on my own. I don't have that power on my own. That's His grace that comes into my life when the mountain's too high and the giant's too tall and the river's too wide. His grace that I'm going to help you overcome it. I'm going to help you scale it. I'm going to help you defeat it. That's grace. That's grace.
That's right.
It's grace. The power of God.
That's right.
To do the will of God. When it's too big for us, too great, He gives us grace.
Yes, He does.
He provides for us what we need. And I think that most of us that are here this evening, in one way or another, know what it's like to get desperate.
Yes.
To get desperate.
Yes. That's right.
Desperate for a drink of water. Desperate for a meal. Desperate for a prayer to be answered. Desperate for a job. Desperate for whatever. Desperate for a family member to come to God. Desperate. You just lay awake at night and you're burdened with that child that's away from God. You're burdened with that parent that just will not listen. You're burdened with that sibling that has wandered away. You're burdened wondering, how am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to get through the next 7 days? The layoff is coming. I have no work in sight. God, I'm desperate. Something has to change here. You get desperate because you know the next doctor's report could be the report that kind of seals it all for you. You're desperate, Lord. Somehow let that x-ray be different. Let that test result be different. we would not normally do. It says that I've run out of all other options, and God, I need you right now. I need you right here. I've got to have you, God. I'm desperate. I can't turn anywhere else. I can't go anywhere else. I can't try anything else. It speaks toward whatever the risk is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Come on.
I'll go have the conversation with the boss. I'll drive across town or fly across the states, and I'll knock on that door and I'll talk to that family member that's estranged.
Oh,
It's
God.
desperate. It's desperate.
Yeah.
Do whatever I have to do. Take on more responsibility.
Thank you, Jesus.
Burn the candle at both ends. Work 2 or 3 jobs. Get a new career. Start over with education. Go to new training. Try to sit down with someone that can help you communicate with your spouse better. You get desperate. I don't want to lose my marriage. What do I need to do? I don't want to lose my marriage. I'll try something. I know I was raised one way, but I'm willing to concede here. I'm willing to give in. I've sat across the desk and across the room from couples that are just moments away, days away, probably hours away from just saying it's all over, and somehow one of them get desperate and say, Pastor, I'll do whatever I have to do. Just tell me, how do I communicate? What do I need to say? How do I treat her? What do I need to act like? People get desperate. And when you get desperate, you're willing to do stuff that you were not willing to do before. And if you don't get to that place of desperation, things just continue to spin out of control. And instead of getting better, it gets worse. Well, I'm not going to go to that training. Well, I'm not going to take that class. If it means you're going to keep your job or lose your job, you'll go to the class because you get desperate, realizing I need to put food on the table for my family.
Yes.
Amen.
Get desperate. I'm too old to learn that. No, you're not.
That's right. Oh, come on.
Desperation will cause you just to try again.
Yes.
To go back again. To work again. To put more effort in. To try something new. And counting. Here's what happens for a lot of people. And at least from my perspective, this is what I see. If a person is still at the place of counting the cost, they're not desperate yet. They're not to the place that I'm preaching about. If you're still weighing it all out, if you're still thinking through it, if you're still trying to figure it out, if you're still counting the cost, then you're not desperate yet. Because when you get desperate, you stop counting the cost. It's no more he said, she said, they did, I did. You forget about all of that stuff. There's no more competition. It's no more one-up. It's no more walk around with a sense of pride. It's like, it doesn't matter. Strip it away from me. I'm desperate now. I'm not going to stay here and weigh it out anymore. I've got to do something.
Right.
If you're still in that weighing out place, you're not to this level of desperation.
Oh, God.
This level of desperation is, you know the odds are against you, but you don't care.
That's right.
You know that things are not stacked in your favor, but that's not going to stop you. You know that the awareness, the reality of this probably isn't going to work out, but it's my only shot.
Yeah. Right.
If you still get up and move forward knowing it's probably not going to work out in your favor, then you're at the place of desperation I'm talking about.
All right.
Because you know that unless God comes through, it's time history. Unless God comes through, this is over. Unless God shows up, then this is bad. Amen. And we see it in our text. I read to you about 4 men. The Bible said they were leprous. They were men that were aware of their reality. Somebody say men that are aware.
Men that are aware.
Man, that's a big statement right there. Because I know a lot of men that are not aware.
That's right.
They're not aware of much of anything. They're not aware of their wife's feelings. They're not aware of their children's needs. They're not aware of the time that it is. They're not aware of the day we're living in. They're not aware because they're living in their own world. But when you come to an awareness as a man, then that speaks volumes about where you are as a person.
Thank you, Jesus.
True.
Because a lot of men just live in a make-believe, made-up world and act like they don't see anything else going on around them. God help us to be aware.
Amen.
You know, the Bible talked about the men of Issachar, that they had an understanding of the time they were living in. That speaks to awareness. They realized, do you guys understand right now we are closer to the coming of the Lord than we have ever been? That there are crazy things that are transpiring all around us, and there are world events that are taking place on a daily basis, that there is probably more prophecy being fulfilled right now than there has ever been in the history of man. There are more prophecies falling into place and coming into alignment right now, and some people are completely oblivious to where we are and what's going on. This is a time for men to rise up and realize God wants to give the church revival like we have never seen before, but we have to lock in, we have to become aware, we have to understand the time that we're living in. And act upon that. Move forward with that. And so here are these men who are desperate, and out of their desperation, 4 leprous men turned the tide and the fate of an entire people.
That's right.
4 men that didn't have everything together, that didn't have everything in their favor, that didn't have all of the things that someone would say you need to survive. They were as low as you could go. They were socially the outcast. They were on the bottom and below, if you understand where I'm coming from. Here they are in desperation, and the Bible tells us a story of how they didn't just talk about things changing. They didn't just say, oh, I wish things were different, but they made up their mind, we're going to do something about changing it. And if it doesn't change, then we'll just die. But this is the only shot that we have. And they got desperate. Somebody shout desperate. Come on, they got reckless with their faith. They just said, this is it. This is what we're going to do. Samaria had come under the siege, and they were suffering by the hand of the Syrians at that time. Famine had set in, and life was beginning to deteriorate, and it was difficult for everybody. I mean, there's very few folks that I personally know that are not having challenges right now. It's difficult for everybody.
That's right.
It's difficult for everybody. I serve as a chaplain for our local police department, and I see things. I see things not just in the low-income areas. I see things in the most affluent areas. I get the same kind of calls. I ride to the same kind of calls, the same responding to the same kind of events in million-dollar homes and in government-assisted places.
Right.
There's still abuse, and there's still addiction, and there's still violence, and there's still, it doesn't matter. I see it on a regular basis. I'm telling you, people are challenged right now. People are feeling strapped right now. People mentally and emotionally are pulled to extremes where they've never been before. Don't know how they're going to make it one more day. I've seen people just of late lose everything that they have, all of the wealth that they have, all of the material things that they have, because of addiction, because of some kind of breakdown, and not realizing that mental health is important, that physical health is important, that family life is important. I can preach to you about a lot of things tonight, but I want you to know that these men were facing the same type of situation. There may not be a shortage of food in this land, but there sure is a shortage of nourishment.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah.
It doesn't always come through the food groups.
That's right.
Right.
Come on, people are not being fed emotionally. People are not being fed mentally.
Amen.
People are not being fed. They're checking out. How many times do I see it on a daily basis? And you do too, going through your life. You can't drive down the road, stop at a stop sign or a stoplight or pass somebody on the interstate. They're not distracted on their phone. They're not. Their mind is somewhere else. And you know, it's like eating sweets all the time. Before long, it's going to catch up with you. The people are trying to feel this longing and hunger in their life for stability emotionally and physically and financially, but they're feeding it with the wrong kind of resource. And so people are struggling, and we see that there is a famine. The Bible talked about a famine coming, and one of the famines that it speaks about is a famine of hearing the word.
Yeah.
Oh God.
That there would come a time that there's a famine in the land. People just not hearing the word.
Right.
Hearing a lot of stuff, but not hearing the word.
Right.
Hearing a lot of self-help, but not hearing the word. Hearing a lot of examples, but not necessarily hearing the word. And this is interesting to me because one of the first statements that we have in 2 Kings 7:1 is, "Hear ye the word of the Lord."
Yeah.
Come on. This sets the tone for the story. I hope you didn't miss that here. That you can look as leprous men at the situation. You can counsel among yourselves. You can talk to others. But what he says matters more. And what he said is, "Behold, I come quickly. Behold, I come quickly. Behold," come on, over and over and over. He leaves us in the last chapter of Revelation saying, if you don't remember anything else about the previous 65 books and the many chapters in this particular book, remember this: "Behold, I come quickly. Behold, I come quickly. Surely I come quickly." 3 times he says it in the last chapter. What is the word saying to us? Get ready, because the Lord is on his way back. Don't listen to what others are saying. Don't listen to what the people of our world are saying. They don't want to hear his word. They don't want it all in. But I'm telling you, the Lord's coming back.
Yeah.
The Lord's coming back. Hear the word of the Lord. Hear the word of the Lord. Tomorrow at this time, he said, tomorrow, this is what's going to go down in the gate. Tomorrow, this is what's going to be sold. And this is what the economics are going to look like. And what you thought was this value, it's all going to change. Things can change in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Well, what about gas prices? What about the things that are changing right now?
Uh-huh.
What about the next several months and what we're going to see? Various types of food and supplies and construction and materials. And I built houses on the East Coast way back when. And I can tell you about storms that hit up the Gulf Coast and through in the Atlantic and come into Florida that many times I'd have to wait. I'd have to wait weeks for sheetrock for a home. I'd have to wait weeks or pay double and triple for plywood or OSB because what I could buy at a certain price when I went to get the construction loan, now all of a sudden things changed, and that same piece of material didn't cost $9 anymore. It cost $27 now. Or they couldn't get into the areas in the Northwest. I can tell you these stories of having, where's my lumber package? Where is my 2x4s? Well, we can't get in. It's going to go up because the machinery that goes into the areas in the Northwest to harvest some of those trees, there's too much rain, the waters have come in and the floods have come in and the ground's too soft and they can't get in there to harvest the trees to produce the wood. And so by the time it gets to you, you're waiting. Listen, get ready, because when our president is now looking at a $15 billion $15 billion package of relief for Harvey last week, what's going to happen this next week? With an unprecedented storm. Things can change just like that.
Yeah.
Come on, things can change. Well, tomorrow at this time, what you bought and sold, what's going to happen here? You got to understand that what we're facing now is no different than what others have faced in the past. I want to get that through to you.
Amen.
The desperation that was there in 2 Kings, the 7th chapter. People were starving. People were trying to survive. They didn't know how they were going to make it. They were under siege. And then you have the severity of it turning in the situation so extreme that people were going to begin contemplating at least selling their own children.
Oh God.
This is where it was going. Selling their own children. Not into slavery. Not into sex trade, like's happening in our world.
Right.
Selling their children for food. To begin to practice cannibalism.
Wow.
It was so desperate that there was nothing else to eat, and they were considering selling their children to feast upon someone else's child. That's bad.
Sure is.
I mean, that's bad. We'll talk about how bad. McDonald's is still open, folks.
Right?
That's bad.
There's still some things open around here.
Yeah.
Come on, you can still get a ham sandwich if you need to. Oh, you find some bologna or some spam or Vienna sausage. You can do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But imagine everything gone and the only option left is children.
Oh God. Oh Lord.
That's how bad it was.
That's right. Yes.
That's
Okay.
bad.
That's bad. Look at your neighbor and say, that's bad.
That's bad.
No, it doesn't get any worse than that. But the situation, that was the situation, okay, inside of the city walls. Okay? That's how bad it was inside the walls.
Right.
Imagine how bad it was outside the walls.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay? Inside the city is where protection, health, provision, strength, favor could come. But if you were ever displaced and put outside of the city walls, you were left on your own. There was no help, no assistance, nobody coming to your rescue. And it was so bad in the city, they were at the place of selling their children.
Oh Lord.
Imagine what it was like outside.
Oh.
Because that's outside of the gates where these 4 men were.
Huh.
They were outside of any potential possibility of survival. Well, these guys decided, at least in the scripture, it turns us to focus on them and hear their story. We don't hear a lot of the story of the people on the inside at this point, but we do hear about people on the outside.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking about folks inside wanted it to change. Folks outside decided, I'm going to do something about seeing the change.
Yes. Yeah.
You can be in bad situation and still want it to change and do nothing about it. It's when you get to the place of, I'm not just going to talk about it anymore. I'm not just going to dream about it anymore. I'm not just going to think about it anymore. I'm going to do something about it. Amen. And so here they are sick, and here they are in need, and their situation is worse than what was normal. And the Bible said in verse number 3, and there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate, and they said one to another, why sit we here until we die? That's a good question, and that's something maybe you ought to ask the person beside you.
Yeah.
Why sit we here till we die? Why am I staying in the situation that I've been in when God wants it to change? Why am I just going to stay here? They said if we stay, we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit still here, we die also. Now therefore, come and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall die. This was their options. We go in the city, we're good as dead. If we stay right here, we're dead.
That's right.
The only option we have is to fall into the hands of our arch enemy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Come come on, I don't want to give up. I don't want to give in. But they were saying, well, you know what? Let's fall into their hands. They may save us alive. They may not. If they don't, we're dying anyway.
Right?
It's over for us anyway. And so it gives us insight. And I want to slow down for a moment. We're going to hurry along, but let me slow down. It gives us insight into their mental condition. How mentally stressed do you have to be to get to the place where your best option is your worst enemy?
It's good.
And you actually buy into that. That you're willing to just surrender to the one that you've been fighting and resisting forever. That's where they were mentally. Hey, that's the option I see. And so, death is facing them on every side. They're literally surrounded by death. Does anybody know what that feels like? Come on, you kind of cut off on every side. Nothing's working out on the job. Nothing's working out in your home. Nothing's working out at the church. Nothing's working out in your family. And you just feel cut off. Because I pastored people that way. And to be honest with you, I found myself there from time to time. Where it just feels like I can't get a break anywhere. I can't get a break on the job. I can't get a break at home. I can't get a break in my finances. I can't get a break. Anybody know what? Just cut off on every side. Just everything seems to be shut off. Everything is closing down, and you're not sure what to do. And so this is where they were. And it's amazing when desperate people realize they're trapped. When desperate people realize they're trapped, all of a sudden a fight comes out in them. It's like, have you ever seen an animal that's in that place where they're kind of pinned up and they may be laid back and docile and everything, but all of a sudden you pin them up, something comes out of them. It's that side of us that all of a sudden rises up when we realize I'm cut off on every side. If I'm going to die, I'm not going to die without a fight. And so I'm going to rise up right now and do something about my situation. I'm going to die anyway. At least I'm going to die trying. I'm not going to die just sitting here. They said, why sit we here till we die? And something came over them that caused them to say, I'm not going out like this. Give your neighbor a high five and say, I'm not going out like this. I'm going to tell them only, I'm not going out like this. I mean, people do all kinds of stuff. They run into gunfire and they take on all kinds of odds when they get there. I'm not going out like this. I'm not going to go out just sitting here. I'm not going to go out just giving up. I'm not going to go out quitting. I'm going out fighting. I'm going out giving my best. I'm going out moving forward. I'm not going out retreating. I'm going out advancing. And if I die in the advance, that's okay. But at least I did something about my situation. Amen. Amen. And so, for some reason or another, they felt the thing to do was to attack the Syrian army. They're leprous men. There's body parts missing. There's flesh and skin and muscle and sinew and cartilage and bone, parts of them completely gone. You may feel that way, that everything you've been through, you don't have much left. But whatever you do have left, rise up and move forward. And don't complain about what you lost on the journey. I don't see them discussing, well, man, it looks like you lost an ear and a finger and part of your nose. Well, yeah, I see your kneecap is gone. And they were, well, it looks bad. You mean I'm going to depend on you? And we can't even come up with one good body with all four of us together. Put all four of us together, we can't come up with one whole complete body. Things are missing. Every one of us come to this retreat in 2017 after the last 12 months saying, I lost something along the way. I lost something along the way. I lost something along the way. But you're here. Amen. And you may not be whole and you may not be intact, but you're still here. They didn't have everything together, but they didn't focus on what they had lost. Come on. All the Bible just says is they were leprous. It doesn't say, now, individual 1 and individual 2, and this is what was going on, because this is what we do.
Yeah.
We try to put it together so we think we're a fair match, or we're an equal, or we can work it out. He doesn't need you intact to do the miraculous.
Good. Come on.
He doesn't need you with all your faculties, and He doesn't need you with everything together. Walk in with all your bills paid, and walk in with a good report from the doctor. He's not waiting for those folks to walk in before He starts moving. Okay, here's someone that their family's intact, and their job is secure, and they're in good health, and all their levels are right, and they're fine, and they've got a 401k, and their retirement is set, and their children are obedient, and their wife is 10, and oh, you're not hearing me right now. He's not waiting for people to walk in and have everything together, and then Him say, that's somebody I can use. He takes a church full of misfits. He takes a body full of people who barely drag in, who have been through all hell on their job, who had to fight through all the pressure, and they had to get through all the stress, and they come together and say, we're not going to sit here and die. Let's see what we can do for the kingdom of God, and get up and move forward. If it was having it all together, I know I wouldn't be here.
Right, right.
I know I wouldn't be here.
Right.
Come on.
Because we all lose a little bit of flesh along the way.
Yeah, we do. Come on.
We all lose a little bit of pride along the way.
That's right.
And we all lose a little bit of strength along the way.
Right.
And we all lose a little bit of ability along the way. And my wife and I talk about it from time to time. The first church we started, we were in our early 30s, and we talk about it. Oh, remember back then.
Hallelujah.
Man, it seemed like you could just work endlessly and tirelessly and raise kids and do everything you have to do. I remember starting a church and teaching 10 and 12 Bible studies a week, trying to provide for my family, teaching 12 Bible studies a week that required a good 2 or 3 hours each time of travel and teaching the Bible study and getting back and trying to maintain the storefront, trying to get forward, and kids in school and all the stuff, and babies and everything you do, traveling and trying to evangelize some, start a church, and I look back now and it's like none of that registered, that you may be tired or you may, oh Lord, whoa, for those days.
Hallelujah.
Come on, we go through life and sickness and issues and family struggles and stress and pressure. It's like being leprous. You just kind of lost some things along the way.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That's good.
I hope you're hearing me.
Yeah.
You don't have to be perfect and intact for
Come on,
God
that's
to
good.
turn things around.
Come on, that's right, that's
You don't
right.
have to have it all together for God to change the situation you're in right now. He'll take what you have left. Amen. He'll take all you have left to give, and He will do something with that. Amen. I don't know, but they thought, let's attack the Syrian army. That's the way to go. You know things are bad when your family's inside the city and you'd rather deal with your enemy than your ex-wife or your mother-in-law or your children. And I'm not saying ex because of divorce, but just because they were quarantined.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
They were separated.
That's right.
Yeah.
Their sickness separated them. Sickness will separate you from people that mean
Come on.
something
That's
to you.
right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. There are times that we say, I didn't choose this. I didn't choose this distance, but it could be your sickness that has created the distance.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It could be your discontentment. It could be your agitation. It could be your stress. It could be, and it seems like instead of people being drawn to you, the people that matter the most to you are moving away from you.
Right.
That's right.
Have you ever been in friendships that all of a sudden change because of what somebody's going through?
Oh, absolutely.
To kind of distance yourself, or they distance themselves from you, or the situation just demands that it has to be that way. We don't like that, but that's where those men were.
Right. Right.
And they literally decided it'd be better to go attack the Syrians than to go home.
Right.
That's right.
That's how much separation and stress and issue was in their life.
That's wrong.
We're going to the enemy's camp. Amen. And because I think they knew that the only potential sustenance, the only potential way of being sustained in life is to head toward the enemy. Because there's no food and survival in the city, and there's no food and survival here. There is food in the enemy's camp. I just don't know if I can get to it, but I'm sure going to try.
Right.
That's what desperation makes you do.
Yes.
Desperation makes you rise up and move in a way where there is potential. And sometimes it might seem impossible, but desperation says try anyway.
Right.
Verse 5 says this, "And they rose up in the twilight to go into the camp of the Syrians. And when they were come to the uttermost part of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots," leprous men.
Yeah.
See, God can turn the movement of leprous men into a sounding chariot. God can take the little that you have left. All the toes are missing, kneecaps are missing, elbows are gone, eyes are gone, ears are gone, and it sounds like chariots coming in that direction. The Bible said, "Behold, there was no man there, for the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. 4 sick, disgusted, desperate men, sounding like an entire army coming that way. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight and left their tents and their horses and their asses, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life." When you get desperate, God will take your desperation and turn it into something you can't even imagine. They got up and said, "We're going, and we're going because there's no other option for us." And when they started hobbling along, it sounded like a chariot. When they started helping one another along, it sounded like horses. It sounded like a host. It sounded, they thought Israel had rose up and hired hands and guns against them. And they just dropped everything they had, and the Syrians began to run. Left the tents, left the food, left the livestock, left everything right there for the taking.
Right.
Come on. You don't know what God will do when you get desperate.
Come on. Yeah.
You don't know how God will shake up the world of your adversary when you get desperate. You can sit there and say, "Well, I wish it would change," and nothing ever changes, and it only gets worse. Or you can rise up and get the attitude of the desperate and say, "We're going that direction because that's the only potential we have of survival." And when they got up, God took over. They started moving in the twilight, and the Bible said the Syrians left in the twilight. Before they ever got to the camp, before you could ever see them coming on the horizon, God had already run the enemy out. You don't have to wait. Get up and start moving now. And before you can get to work Monday, something can change. Before you can get home tonight, something can change. Before you have the conversation, or the face-to-face, let's stand together, something can change. God's not waiting for you to get there. He's just waiting for you to get up and move. He's not waiting for you to move in. He's waiting for you just to get desperate and start in that direction. If you just start moving that way, He starts working for you. Story. I love it. God started working in their difficulty. At the moment they started moving.
Yes.
I want to ask you a question. What is God ready to do for you
It's good.
right now? What is He ready to do for those men who will rise up right now, out of their idleness
Yes.
and into action?
Praise you.
Why are you waiting on the women of the church to get it?
It's good.
Why are you waiting on the young people of the church to get it?
Come on.
Where are the men that will rise up in churches across North America right now
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
and start moving,
Yes.
leading,
Yeah.
Not because everything's perfect in their life, but because they just get desperate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord.
Listen,
Yes.
we were in a storefront, and we had a handful of people who were that won to the Lord and trying to move forward. And I'm going to tell you that our services were dead. They were lifeless.
Oh, God. Help us.
One of the reasons was everybody was new. Nobody knew the first thing about true worship. Sensitivity to the Spirit. Everybody's new. They're babies. They don't. We're in a storefront, and I'm preaching my guts out, and people are staring at me. And I started getting desperate. God, if I'm the only one running, if I'm the only one jumping, if I'm the only one shouting, then I'll just keep doing it until something breaks.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, we were going into a summer season, and a couple came to the church. A man that I don't even know much about his life other than the fact that the family was in somewhat disarray, and his wife was sickly and handicapped. Had a lot of issues, a lot of struggles. And they came, and it sat on the back row of that little storefront, metal folding chairs. From the first service, that man would lift his hands and weep and cry, shout and worship. And my wife, this is how bad it was. My wife was learning to play the keyboard because we didn't have any music. And if I clapped, I'd say, what? She said, stop clapping. Because if I clapped, I'd get her off, and she couldn't keep up with the music. And so we'd get home, I'd say, baby, we got to sing a fast. We can't sing fast songs. I can only play a few chords, and it has to be slow songs. It's going to be bad. I said, well, it is bad. She said, it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. So I would have to leave the service and not clap and try to sing and not sing too fast because she couldn't keep up on the keyboard. And this man would worship God and shout and dance like he was at some convention, and there were hundreds of people around in that little storefront, and something started changing. And week 1 and week 2 and week 3 and a month went by, and others sitting around him began to worship. People that I'd been preaching to that hadn't moved forever because they didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, one man started changing the whole atmosphere. They only stayed 2 or 3 months, and then they went on to another place. In fact, last I heard, he went on to pastor a Baptist church.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Thank you.
I'll tell you one thing. That man created an atmosphere of
Yes.
worship in a little storefront
Right.
that when they were gone, it never went back to what it was before.
praise God.
You can make a difference in your family. You can make a difference in your church. You can make a difference in your community. It's when you get desperate and say, if nobody else is doing it, I don't care. If nobody else is running that way, I'm going to. Because something inside of me says, my children need to grow up in an atmosphere of an apostolic power and presence of God. Our church needs a witness and outpouring of the Holy Ghost. My family needs to feel something when they walk in the doors of the house. I'm praying for men in this retreat to get desperate before God and say, if nobody else does it, I'm not looking at my past. I'm not looking at what I've lost. I'm just looking forward, saying, I'm desperate for a move of God. I'm desperate for anointing. I'm desperate for an outpouring. I'm desperate for something to change. And I'm going to do it if I have to go into the job and do something radical.
Right.
Yeah, Lord. Jesus. Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
One of the finest young men that I ever pastored died in Afghanistan serving our country. His life was taken by a suicide bomber that came busting through into their fob, exploded, and he lost his life there. The night I got the call when it happened, I went to his house to see his wife and 2 small daughters. Just sat there with them as a knock comes on the door and says, he'd been deployed times before. before, and he only had a few weeks left on that one. When I went with his wife to Dover and met his body coming back, I stood at the ramp ceremony in the middle of the night with only a few people, other family members that had lost their loved ones. His funeral was a man that we asked to speak that was a part of our church, also serving in the military. He told a story. He said, when I first met Chris, he said I was leading a particular unit, and he was just one of the new, soon recruits or soldiers coming into my unit. Happened to be assigned into my office as an assistant. And he said I didn't know it, but every morning before I'd get to work, Chris would walk into my office and lay his hands on my desk. And he would pray over my desk. And he would lay his hands on the chair that I sat in, and he would pray over my chair. He'd walk in my office with no one knowing it, and he pled the blood of Jesus Christ in my office and on the things that I would be a part of that day. He said I didn't know it, but he did that day after day after day. And then he would come to me and he would invite me to church. And he said every week I'd tell him, "I'm not coming to church, Chris. I'm not coming to your church." And he said he just kept on asking, kept on. He said, so finally I decided I would get him off my back, and I would agree to go to church with him one time. He said, I called my wife and said, don't make any plans this weekend. And she said, why? What are we doing? We have this, that, and the other. He said, we're going to go to church. I said, church? We didn't go to church. What do you mean going to church? I said, I've got a guy in my unit that's driving me crazy. He will not leave me alone. Here's an officer talking. He said, he's just relentless. I've got to get him off my back somehow. He's got to leave me alone. So we're going to church Sunday. Maybe it'll shut him up. I never have to go back again. I said, I can't believe, Maverick, I can't believe that you've agreed to us going to church. We're going.
All right.
He said, when I went that Sunday, my life was changed. God filled Maverick with the Holy Ghost. Maverick was baptized in Jesus' name. His wife was, the kids were. The whole family was changed because one soldier in a unit every day just said, I'm desperate, God. I'll plead the blood over him. Just walk in. And he said, Maverick told the story. He said, I found out later that Chris was going in my office every day praying over my desk before I got there, praying over everything. Listen, when you get desperate, you'll do stuff. Chris gave his life. I heard men stand. One man told a story of, he said we were in a unit and we had been called out to the Kuwaiti border, and we were in a particular village, and he said we came under fire. The command was given for all of us to head to the vehicles. We were pulling out, and he said everybody loaded up. We're counting everybody. We're under fire. And he said I'm the gunner. I'm on top. I'm trying to figure out. I'm looking around, and the only person not in the vehicle is Chris. And people are saying, "Where's Chris? Where's Chris?" And he said, "I don't know, but I'm not leaving him here." And he said I jumped off the vehicle and ran back into the streets of that little village while we were taking fire to try to find Chris. And he said when I rounded one of the corners, I heard somebody talking in English, and when I went around the corner, I saw Chris standing on a side road telling somebody about Jesus right in the middle. He said that's the kind of man Chris was. That's the kind of person he was. I'm here today to tell you his witness changed my life. When you get desperate, you don't care what others think. You